Hey, guys. Welcome to Building This Community.
This is your city business and policy development podcast. We're your hosts,
Luke Patrick
and Andrew Klump. Welcome to this week's episode of Building This Community. Our guest today is Adam Edelen, who is the former Kentucky State Auditor who previously ran for governor, as well as founder of Edelen Strategic Ventures and Edelen Renewables. Adam, how are you?
Man, I'm great. It's snowy this morning in Lexington, but I'm glad to be with you all.
Yeah, we appreciate you stopping in, man.
Yeah, man.
So I gave a little bit of your background, but can you just kind of tell us a little bit about your career and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I've had a pretty varied career for a guy who's still in his mid 40s, a relatively young guy. I had an extensive career in business and government. I worked my way through UK as an assistant to Paul Patton when he was lieutenant governor, and then ran for governor and became an aide to the governor when he won. And after that, I left and was an executive at the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, worked on the executive team of a large company based here in Lexington. Went back, got called back into government when my friend Steve Beshear was elected governor. I became his chief of staff and served there for 2.5 years before stepping out to run for state auditor, where I was the taxpayer watchdog for 4 years. And then I came in and founded a business consultancy that became consumed with renewable energy and found itself at a very special place in the renewable energy transition. And we took what we had learned as a result of all of that and ran a really aggressive campaign for governor, focused on trying to convince the state that the future is brighter than the past. We got in a little late. We're unsuccessful, but we got to run the kind of ideas-based, future-looking campaign we wanted to do. And I returned to my practice, where we've now we've founded Edelen Renewables, which has a portfolio of more than a dozen projects in 7 states. Capital investment of about $2 billion, and the potential to, to leverage new energy for a new American dream. And the mission of my company, very simply, is to bring the promise of renewable energy to the forgotten places of America. And we're doing that in some pretty compelling places like Appalachia.
Well, I think that's honestly super impressive. I've followed the career for a long time now, but can you maybe explain the goals you have when you founded both Edelen Strategic Ventures and Edelen Renewables?
Yeah, man, that is a great question. Listen, and I'm a capitalist, and it's become unpopular in some quarters to say that, but I absolutely believe in the ability of the free market to create opportunity for people. And, I think a useful comparison point here is our project in Martin County, which is beginning to get a lot of attention, reflects $250 million capital investment in one of the poorest counties in the United States. This site is literally a handful of miles away from where Lyndon Johnson launched the war on poverty. And while that was incredibly important and provided a lifeline for a lot of folks, let's not confuse survival with thriving. And certainly facilitating a capital flow of $250 million into Martin County is something I couldn't have done as governor. So I'm passionate about the ability to leverage all the innovation and the creativity and the grit and the hard work of entrepreneurs for the benefit of the local communities. And Luke, to your point, a major focus of ours is what we call conscious capitalism. We've literally trademarked the phrase social impact solar, because what makes us different is that we leverage the enormous capital investment in each one of these projects for the real benefit of the local community, from making sure that locals have preference in job hiring, that making sure the folks that we are able to hire are able to leave that project with an academic certification as a result of our partnership with the community and technical college system, making sure that local contractors get the opportunity to work on these projects. That really is our focus, because my frustration in Kentucky is, we are brilliant in moments, right? I mean, we're one of the first state. We're the first state in the South to pass a comprehensive civil rights law. Great. We were the first state in the country to declare our entire system of education, K through 12, unconstitutional. And we built back one on the premise that all kids can learn and learn at high levels. We were among the first in the country to scrap a system of community and technical education and build one back married on the needs of the private sector. We were one of the first states in the country to adopt the Medicaid expansion. Those are all brilliant moments. The problem is in between, we just sort of languish. And we can't rely on government to do everything. And if Kentucky in the South and Appalachia are going to be what they ought to be, we've got to invest in people, and we've got to build tomorrow's economy rather than today's. And so the themes that have always sort of served as the linchpin of my founding beliefs in the private sector translated nicely in the public sector, translated to the private sector. And the great thing about the private sector is, and one of the things I love about it is that effort generally equals outcome, which after 20 years in government and politics, I can tell you isn't always the case on the side.
So I guess setting aside the political aspects, which I know must be tough for somebody that has spent a large part of their career in politics, but
Sure.
do you think Kentucky has the necessary elements to become a major renewable energy producer? Like, do we have, enough sunlight for solar? Do we have enough waterways for hydroelectric? Do we have the tools here to actually become a force in renewables like we were in coal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first is we can't buy into the narrative of the fossil fuel dinosaurs that solar works everywhere. There's literally not a square mile in America where solar doesn't work. And that's largely a response to the innovation we've seen in the technology. I mean, these solar projects, these solar panels have double-digit increases in efficiency every couple of years. It's remarkable. So solar can work anywhere. We have an incredibly entrepreneurial culture, fellas. I point out to people all the time, and culture's best defined by scarcity, economic scarcity. People become really good at just getting by. That's the inherent. That's in the DNA of being an entrepreneur. And so we have lots of folks, and you just need to look around. I mean, not on the ideological scale, but look what's happening in the entrepreneurial community. You've got, my friend Jonathan Webb, who is brought, App Harvest to Kentucky. He and I sort of incubated each other's ideas a long time ago, and he's had incredible grit. And now we've got like the 9th largest building on the planet in Morehead, Kentucky, growing tomatoes. That's a very big deal. My friend Nate Morris, who came up in Republican politics, founded Rubicon, which is doing amazing things in the waste space. Talk about a guy disrupting a traditional industry. I mean, garbage collection is one of the oldest industries on the planet, and doing great things. And of course, my friend Gil Holland, revitalizing communities in Louisville, and said, done amazing things, and says, well, if that's not enough, I'm going to go put a brewery in Harlan. I mean, there are lots of people like you guys who are doing really cool stuff. Here's the problem. These things are happening in spite of government, not because of them. And that's not a criticism of anybody in government. It's just our culture here doesn't demand high expectations. So the people who are really trying to run the score up, the folks who are really trying to do innovative things, who are, whether it's a moonshot like putting, a $250 million solar array on a mountaintop removal site in eastern Kentucky, or trying to make Kentucky an agri-tech center. These are really big, important things. And so what we need to do is harness the know-how, the skill, the grit of the folks in the private sector who are making this happen every day, because there's some exciting things going on.
Well, I wanted to talk for a second about the actual kind of geography or topography in Kentucky and how that might play a role. The one thing I had in mind was, and you've seen it gaining steam in the public dialogue lately, is this pumped storage hydroelectricity. Because I guess one of the big issues in renewables is energy storage, because you can create excess capacity in your peak production hours, but you need to kind of have the ability to store that for later when, you're not at peak production. And we've seen these kind of like water batteries get a lot of press lately. Do you think that's something that we could see implemented here in Kentucky?
So that's really expensive. And what you're describing is exactly right, man. The issue with renewable energy is that it is intermittent, right? The sun shines during the day and the wind tends to be at its highest at night. And so what we need are smoothing technologies that help these things offset each other. That's coming. The battery is the holy grail. No doubt, guys, it's going to occur in our lifetimes. And I want people to think about what this means. When we democratize power production, and we have a battery that enables us to, at a large scale, store the power that is produced renewably. This is going to change the world, and it's really exciting, and it will happen. The question is, what do we do between now and then? Because only fools bet against the United States or innovation. We're going to get this, I promise. This is going to happen. The question is whether it's going to be an American company or the Chinese government who gets there first. But this is the space race of our age, and people need to think about solar panels as the crude oil of our time. And this is a really big, important fight. I mean, how long can we live with the fact that our biggest competitor, some would say enemy in China, produces now 70% of the panels on the planet? That's a real problem. It's a national security problem in addition to an economic security issue. So fellas, the question is, how do we bridge the gap between where we are and where we know that the holy grail of battery technology is going to be fixed? And there are ideas like water storage, which essentially uses renewable energy to pump that water up a hill and then allows it, as it comes down, to generate energy again. It's happening. There are lots of folks trying it. I think there are some folks who are actually doing it at utility scale, particularly in Europe. But it's really expensive. And so that's sort of the offsetting spot about where we are. And you hear, just be real candid, you hear a lot of like the lie that's being told right now that Texas fell off, that the grid in Texas collapsed because the wind turbines froze. That's insane. I mean, certainly it was a contributor to it, but you don't have to. Do a Google of wind turbines, and you'll see in places like Scandinavia and Canada, these things have no problem turning around. The issue is that Texas is the only state in the country with its own energy market. It's called ERCOT. It was terribly mismanaged, and the reason they've got rolling blackouts and people without power is because that system is mismanaged. It doesn't have a thing in the world to do with renewables. If you look at a power outage map of the United States yesterday, it's literally Texas and Appalachia. And we burn a lot of coal in Appalachia and still have a lot of people without power. So, it's not just it's about being welcoming about new technologies. It's about understanding that we all have a role in driving innovation. The world's just not flat anymore. I've got almost all of my partners in our coal to solar practice are coal companies who understand that the world has changed, and our government leaders and opinion leaders need to understand that the renewable energy revolution is here. It will not slacken. It will only hasten, and it's going to change the way we live our lives. There are going to be a hell of a lot more people who over the next 5 years buy electric cars than think they're going to buy electric cars. This is a huge deal, and we've got a decision to make. We're either going to tack our sails to benefit from this transition, the shifting winds of this new economy, or we're going to get run over by these market forces. And to me, that's a no-brainer.
So I guess talking about this changing landscape of renewable energies, do you think getting back into that kind of what you do best question, like should the different regions focus on like what their geography dictates? Should regions in the Southwest lean into solar, whereas maybe the Midwest into wind? And if so, like what is Kentucky's niche in the renewable sector? So
Kentucky's niche is going to be coal to solar projects. And fellas, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get these large scale utility projects through planning and zoning in communities that are predominantly agricultural. It really is difficult. And here in central Kentucky, there have been several that have been shot down by local planning and zoning commissions. The great thing about, and it's because people don't want to look at them. And listen, I get that. I get that. But I also want people to understand saving the planet is an existential crisis. And we're all going to have to make some sort of sacrifices. The fact of the matter is, no matter where you live in populated America, in 10 years, you're going to be within 30 minutes of a utility scale solar site. That's just a reality. But understanding that sensitivity provides us an opportunity to reimagine and rethink the economy of our coal communities, because what you get with these mountaintop removal sites, and guys, there's 1 million acres of these in central Appalachia. You know, they're vast expanses that are flat. They have proximate access to really great transmission and distribution infrastructure. A lot of people don't realize that it took a lot of power to power the coal industry. And so that infrastructure is there. We don't have any of the planning and zoning sensitivities that you have when you turn a coal field into a project. And so this is a big opportunity. The issue is that it's more expensive. As you can imagine, the engineering and geotech issues at 2,000 feet are a lot different than they are in an agricultural space. They are more expensive to engineer and produce. But what we have found is that off-takers, these very large companies that buy the power in order to meet their sustainability goals, you see them on television every night. Companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google and Apple and Toyota and Walmart and Anheuser-Busch and almost the entirety of the Fortune 500 now have corporate sustainability goals. And the big vehicle for which they accomplish those goals of being net carbon zero or 100% renewably powered is that they buy the power produced at these utility scale solar sites like the ones I'm working on. And so we have a big opportunity in those areas. In Kentucky, the sun is really abundant in Western Kentucky. The issue there is that you're in a different energy market. Eastern Kentucky is fortunate to be in what's called the PJM, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland market, which stretches from just below the New York border through the mid-Atlantic states, into Virginia, through central Appalachia and out to Chicago. It's the world's largest energy market. It has far more demand than supply. We can get our solar projects in there and still have them competitive. Western Kentucky, we're still trying to figure it out. It's in the MISO market. There's a lot less demand in that market. And so our projects really do have to be more cost competitive, but we're getting there. So that's Kentucky's future. Biomass is also a big opportunity for us as well. Hydro is an important opportunity, but we're not a high wind state, believe it or not. But 100 miles to our north in West Virginia, they've got an abundant wind feedstock. So you're right. It is going to be specifically tailored solutions that suit the country. But we're already, as a result of the natural gas revolution that happened. I mean, 20 years ago, nobody knew that the United States was the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and we really are. And we are already energy independent, which is an incredibly important economic and national security goal, and it's one that I applaud. Now we've got to be very strategic about how we make the shift and use natural gas as a bridge to getting us to a renewably powered economy, and we're well on our way. And if we do this right, Kentucky can be at the center of this. And so, fellas, the issue for me is it all comes down to one question, particularly the work we're doing in Appalachia, is do you believe that the very people who powered the industrial development of this country for 100 years, do you believe they have a place in the economy of the next 100 years? And if you don't, you're a jerk. But if you do, that means we've got to double down and make sure these coal to solar projects that I'm working on can pencil and work. And we believe we've cracked the code. We believe we've successfully got this engineered properly, that when we go to construction next year, we're 100% sure that it's going to work. But leadership makes the difference. The governor of Virginia just a couple of weeks ago, fellas, announced that he's going to use Virginia's abandoned mine land grant money. These are dollars that are made available from the bonds that have been released as a result of coal companies going bankrupt. The governor of Virginia is going to use that power to incent solar developers to turn Southwest Virginia coal communities into a new energy capital. That is a big damn deal. And we ought to be doing it. We ought to do it in Kentucky. The governor of Ohio ought to do it for southeastern Ohio. Virginia needs to be all over this. Pennsylvania needs to be all over this. That's leading from the front, and it makes a difference.
So I think that's an important, that last part that you talked about. I want to move into that a little bit. So I think, at least from the national perspective, we've seen, I think, more liberal Democratic leaders go back and forth on how they necessarily address the issue of transitioning from coal to renewable. Some is much more combative, and others are much more what you're talking about, which I think is the better approach, which is we have to find a place for these people in the future. What is, the place for people in coal country? What is their role in moving us towards the renewable energy that we need?
So when you look at this, that's an awesome question. So when you look at this, let's look at this at the microeconomic level, and let's describe the attributes of coal miners. Okay. These are people who bust their ass. This is hard damn work. These are people who skin their knuckles, literally getting on their knees to scrape coal out, or, running major equipment on a strip job. These are folks who show up for work every day. They're people who can pass a drug test. They're collaborative by nature. Mining is all about working in a team. And they're problem solvers. 1.5 miles into the earth, fellas, you really can't call anybody to solve a problem. Those skill sets are one that you would want in any industry, right? And so it's incredibly transferable to what we're trying to do in renewable energy, particularly in solar development. Now, this is solar development, let me say from the outset, it's not a panacea. But our project in Martin County is going to create about $330 an hour jobs in the construction phase, which will be 12 to 18 months for these out-of-work miners. And because we formed such a tight relationship with the community and technical college system, these guys are going to leave with an academic credential at the end of this period that says that they're certified in utility-scale solar installation. That is a huge deal. And what it means is my company is building a pipeline of projects across Appalachia where our hope is that we can generate long-term employment. Now, everybody in rural America drives for work, fellas. It's just a reality, right? So if we can, do this in Martin County and then have Floyd and Perry County come up behind it, or the projects we're working on in Southwest Virginia or Southeastern Ohio and now about to break into in West Virginia, we can create an abundance of opportunities that pay really good wages. But we gotta have some help. I'm going first here. This is a moonshot, and we're confident that it's going to work. But I call it the solar coaster for a reason. I mean, this thing has lived and died 1,000 deaths, and we have got to get the public space on the side of innovation and entrepreneurship. And that means embracing renewable energy. Kentucky doesn't have a renewable energy standard, and it's in its energy portfolio. That's quite literally nuts. I mean, that's like communicating to the world, hey, we're not interested in new economy economic development. Jonathan Webb will tell you that the ability to expand AppHarvest footprint in Kentucky is limited because of our public officials' either hostility or lack of awareness about renewable energy and lack of a commitment to making Kentucky more of a renewable energy center. We fight here about the economic development strategy of the 70s and 80s, which is, hey, come to Kentucky because taxes are low, because we don't invest in education or healthcare like we should. Come to Kentucky. We've got these great protections in place, so the worker who gets hurt on the line can't sue you. Come to Kentucky, and we've underfunded a whole lot of things, and a new economy company says, wait a minute, what you're telling me is that you haven't invested in quality of life. Your workforce isn't adequately prepared for the opportunities of the future, and I'm supposed to come there because the taxes are low and you don't offer renewable energy. We're literally off the grid for those kind of opportunities, and that is just straight talk. People don't want to hear it, but our leaders, I say this as a former Chamber of Commerce executive, guys, we got to get our head out of the sand. I mean, this is insane. We've got an economic development strategy that says, come to Kentucky, we've got a right to work law. And meanwhile, big tech is looking around saying, well, we don't take pride in abusing our workers. So that really wouldn't benefit us. I mean, it makes us sound like knuckle dragging rubes. And this is where we are. And so renewable energy is a big opportunity to change that and recognize that in the new economy, the pillars of modern economic development are healthy, educated workforce, access to renewable energy, and an entrepreneurial culture and a simplified tax code. That's it, right? And so we've chosen to go a different direction. It's frustrating, but we've got entrepreneurs who are taking Kentucky by dint of their resolve and effort in a different direction. And listen, I'm proud to be one of them, but there's some folks out there who are just kicking ass in bringing Kentucky into the 21st century, whether our electeds want to take us there or not.
So one thing that I think is always a very important question is, do we think that these renewable energy jobs create viable alternatives to the coal industry going like perpetually, or
Sure.
are these going to be more temporary jobs, like when the transcontinental railroad was made or when the highway system was built? Like, those were big booms in the economy, but they were temporary, they were waning. Is renewable a similar facet, or do you see these jobs being more long-term?
Renewables are foundational. Okay. And so let's talk about Appalachia. As in any resource-focused economy and culture, there is a failure to diversify. And that's not just about Appalachia, y'all. Look at Saudi Arabia, right? So awash in oil money that they haven't begun to diversify until the last 10 years. They've been a kingdom for 70 or 80, right? Russia is a petro state, and the Russian economy hasn't fully developed because when you're so mineral rich, it provides a disincentive to diversify your economy. We've now learned the hard way that you have to do it. And this is an example of something, fellas, that really pisses me off. Because we can get it right, because we have gotten it right. I am from Meade County, Kentucky, which is about an hour southwest of Louisville. My family grew tobacco in Kentucky for over 100 years. I grew up in the tobacco patch. I hated every minute of it. It's the worst work I've ever done, but it provided a very nice sort of middle-class living for my family. And when the tobacco farmers and our elected leaders understood that there was no future in it because it causes cancer, there was a focus to diversify. And leaders like Paul Patton in Kentucky and Jim Hunt and Mitch McConnell and Wendell Ford and all the coal state guys got together. They forced a master settlement agreement with the cigarette companies. They took the proceeds from that, gave them to the farmers to diversify their effort. And now 25 years later, gate farm receipts in Kentucky and across all of the tobacco states is dramatically up. My old man is demonstrably economically better off than he was before he took the tobacco bailout. That's an example of us getting it right. But what do we do in the coal fields? Not a damn thing. We said, if you elect someone other than Barack Obama president, the coal jobs will come back. This has to do with regulation. And we did all those things, and they're not back. More coal burning facilities closed under 4 years of Donald Trump than 8 years of Barack Obama. That is a fact. And this is not a government force. It is a market force, because nobody under the age of 40 doesn't believe in climate change. Even the conservative kids are environmentally sensitive. And so what this means is it's a market force, and that's what's driving this. You think BlackRock or the street is embracing ESG and conscious capitalism as an ethos because it loses some money. You're nuts. They're doing this because they understand it's the new market reality, and young people in particular who now dominate the marketplace. I mean, the millennials are the largest generation in the history of this country, and the one behind them is bigger than mine, the Xers. And they're environmentally conscious, they're value driven, and whether it's a chicken sandwich or a Camry, they're not going to make a purchase that doesn't reflect their values. And I, for one, think that's fantastic. But what it means is we've got to change the way we do business to either benefit from these new market forces or to utterly be crushed by them. So back to your point, renewable energy is foundational. If you want to draw a data center, which everybody thinks the cloud is this ethereal place. It's not. The cloud is a huge warehouse somewhere. Matter of fact, it's hundreds, if not thousands, of these warehouses that are 3 or 4 stories tall, that are stacked with servers and air conditioned to 55 degrees, populated by people who make $100,000 a year serving them. You can't get one of those without a renewable energy portfolio, because these guys aren't going to burn fossils to power them, period. And so we can either argue with the people who own opportunity and have the resources to spread it to us, or we can accommodate them. And I think this is one where accommodation makes sense. If you don't make peace with the future, you're going to be destroyed by it. That's where we are. That's the decision we've got to make. And regrettably, we're not making it as quickly as we should.
So I think that brings us back, full circle to, actual government policy. You talked about how the private sector is doing this despite current public policy, at least in Kentucky. And, you've had issues with local planning commissions. Where should the policy for renewables be, at whether the local, state, or federal level, or some kind of?
And Andrew, the answer is all of the above. But honestly, I would settle right now for them just getting out of our way. One of the things that's really exciting, I brought in I'm at the stage in my own company, and I know you all are entrepreneurs and I love to be tuned into the entrepreneurial space. I'm at the difficult stage in my company where we're trying to scale. I mean, we're the proverbial dog that caught the truck, right? And so I brought in a really talented consultant to look at our stuff. And he just said, Adam, you need to double your projections. This is the way the world's going. You're on to something. Keeping up is going to be tough. And one of the things that is really positive in my space is the leadership of the Biden administration. I mean, President Biden gave a speech a couple of weeks ago where he said, we're doubling down on a renewable energy future. We're going to modernize the grid, which is incredibly important. Just ask the people in Texas this morning how important that is. And we're going to do it in such a way as to not leave behind fossil fuel communities, oil, gas, and coal. And that's a really big deal. So the things that specifically can be done is the same advantages that are now built into law for the oil and gas and coal economies, and things like depreciation allowances. We need those kind of things memorialized in law to benefit renewables. Let's make the 30% tax cut permanent. Let's give developers the opportunity of taking a cash grant and being able to monetize that over the long term. Let's incentivize further these big companies that are literally driving renewable energy demand. It's a big deal, y'all, that in Trump took us out of the Paris Accords, which said we're going to hit our number by 2035, and the free market in the United States just yawned. I mean, we stayed in. We had states like California and New York that stayed in, but almost all of the big companies said, no, we had far more big corporations say, not only are we going to keep our 2035 goals, we're going to hasten them. That's a big deal. And so, we just need government that understands that this is happening, guys. And I shout this from the rooftops. And what's awesome is everybody under the age of like 40 gets it. Right? Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, everybody under the age of 40 gets it. People older or more traditionally trained, sort of scratch their head. But the green energy transition is the biggest economic transition since the internet. And it's the greatest opportunity to spread people having the ability to compete in a global economy that we've seen in at least since then. This is one of those rare pivot points in history, global history, economic history, where communities that have fallen behind have the opportunity to slingshot into the future. And we're not doing enough to accelerate the readiness of our local communities to do that. And it's a shame. We're gonna get there, but at the end of this, in 10 or 15 years, when people are really moving quickly in the future, if we look back and say, damn, we missed that opportunity, fellas, it could be another 50 or 100 years before technology and economic forces conspire to create an opportunity like this again.
I totally agree. And, anytime I get the chance to discuss renewables, I absolutely jump at the opportunity. I love it. I think it's something that more people should talk about, more people should focus on. But we had one question we wanted to pose to you while we had you on here. Is there any chance at another run for political office in your future?
So guys, I'm only 46, so I'm still a young man in the political world, right? I mean, our president is knocking on the door of 80. But guys, I think as you can tell from this interview, I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, this is really, if if building a place for people who have been left behind in the economic transition that we're living through isn't enough to get you out of bed in the morning, I don't know what is. And, listen, I would have loved to have been governor. It was my life's ambition. It's something that I wanted to do since I was a boy, and I love this state. But as governor, I could have never brought $250 million to Martin County, right? And we're nowhere near stopping, guys. So, I hope you'll have me back every once in a while, so I can update you on our progress. I mean, we're over a dozen projects that are in development. I can't keep up with what we've got. And so when people agree to invest, a couple of $1 billion in projects in which you're involved with developing, you have to make certain commitments to folks. and I'm not worth anywhere near a fraction of, $250 million. So I want to make these things happen. I think this is where I'm going to be for the next 10 years. 8 or 10 years for sure. And, we'll figure it out. You never say never, but I think you all know, particularly you, Lucas, who followed my career, I'm a man of action and I bore rather easily. So I'm going to be at this for a long time because it's exciting and impactful. And we're bringing the promise of renewable energy to the forgotten places of this country. But if it ever gets boring, I'll find something else to do. I do want to leave you with this. I've spent a lot of my life trying to figure out what the meaning of life is, and winning and losing and having as many defeats as I've had victories and ups and downs, personal and professional. The best thing I found is what Teddy Roosevelt said, and that is that the meaning of life is working hard at work worth doing. And I'm working very hard at really something I believe is work worth doing. And as long as I can do that, I will be fulfilled.
That's a great one. I love that quote. You mentioned the projects you've got going on with all of your multiple ventures. Is there anything specifically, through those ventures or in your personal life, any projects you want to promote?
Yeah, well, I would just say, watch this space, right? And when COVID lifts, good Lord willing, hopefully this summer, we've got an announcement particularly relevant to Martin County that is going to be a very big deal. That is held up because of COVID. And we've got a lot of forces coming together from all over the world. But the truth is they just can't get here right now. It's not safe. And so when this lifts, we'll have some exciting announcements, but watch what we're doing. I mean, we are in conversation. I was on a call yesterday about expanding our company and our social impact mission to the tribal space in the Western United States. Now that could be really cool, right? I mean, imagine the bookend of having done socially impactful renewable projects in coal country and then in First Nations communities. That's awesome. I want to do, if I can figure it out, I want to do a project in inner city America in a big way. Because if this transition, listen, we got a lot of people who are struggling, who are just dying, begging, praying for an opportunity. And we could leverage this really special moment to give them that opportunity. And I'm deeply fulfilled by this. It's cool as hell. It's great work. I learn something every day. And, I'm glad folks like you are interested in helping us amplify our story.
Yeah. We have had a blast having you on today. Before we can let you go, we like to ask all of our guests this same final question. Okay. If you could change one policy in Kentucky, what would it be?
Oh, hell, you got a day? No, I'm kidding. You guys, I know you paid attention to my campaign for governor. There were about 1 million. But if I had to pick one right now, and it's not just about the subject matter, it's about what it spiritually means, it is that we have got to give communities the ability to have the local option on the sales tax. Power is concentrated in Frankfort. We have a legislature that has never been as powerful as it is right now, but it's not one that has a sort of progressive view to what the future looks like. And I don't mean progressive in a political sense. I mean it in an economic sense. And so we've got to get power out of Frankfort and disperse it to local communities. And local communities need to be able to make decision-making through ballot initiatives about whether how they want to levy the sales tax for the benefit of local projects. This has been used to extreme effectiveness and some of the most conservative places in the United States. The local option sales tax literally took Oklahoma City from being a backwater to being one of the hottest middle-sized cities in America. And the problem we've got in Kentucky is too much power is centrally concentrated in Frankfort. There's not enough power at the local level for communities like Louisville and Lexington and Paducah and everybody in between to make their own decisions about how they grow their own economy. So if I had one, that would be it. And I don't think it's moving where we are now. I also would love to, I think it's hard for anybody to read the papers and conclude that annual sessions of the legislature were a good idea. I skew libertarian here. I think the Kentucky General Assembly and their behavior over the last couple of years is makes a pretty good case study for me why we need a little less government in Kentucky and not more.
Fair enough. Well, and I couldn't agree more with the local option sales tax. I think what's happened in Oklahoma City is just the exact example of what cities across the country should or have been doing with that.
And I'm with you. I think that change to in every year legislature has not yielded the kind of dividends that they were expecting.
No, I mean, the argument was that a board of directors should meet annually. I agree completely. But the issue we've got is that it's become a place that it hasn't professionalized the service of the legislature. It's professionalized the political climate. And so now you have dueling caucuses issuing talking points against each other every day, confusing fighting with progress. And there's a huge difference. And so, listen, as my dad said in a more colorful version, you can't put the manure back in the horse. I get it. But we need to be more strategic in our decision making in the state. And we need to understand that the future is coming whether we like it or not. And sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to make us relevant to those opportunities. And not enough of that is happening, in my view, right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Adam. This has been fantastic.
We'll pick back up with our reaction segment after a word from our sponsor.
Well, Luke, that was another interesting interview with Adam Edelen. I thought he hit on something that we hit on routinely with our episodes, which is, our state policies compared to what businesses are looking for. And I think it's interesting that we see, Fortune 500 companies looking for renewable energies. And if we aren't focused on that as a state, it's going to be harder to attract Fortune 500 companies. And that's even beyond some of the things that he's talked about, which is like employment or healthcare or other ideologies.
Yeah, no, I thought Adam said a lot that was pretty interesting, and I wasn't kidding when I said he's a character that I've followed his career for a long time now. He's a really impressive guy. For me, it was honestly his work in Martin County. That's something that has stood out since I was in high school. Honestly, I've had kind of a focus on it. For anybody that doesn't know, Martin County was the site of in 2000 of a massive coal slurry spill. And what coal slurry is, like in the coal cleaning process, they use a lot of really noxious chemicals, like hazardous chemicals, to wash the worst toxins out of the coal so that when you burn it, it doesn't go into the air. But then it goes into this nasty mixture called slurry. And what they have to do is build these huge reservoirs for them. Like don't think the size of a pool, think the size of like a small valley near the coal production facilities. And one of these in Martin County, they're all lined with plastic, but it happened to be over an abandoned coal mine. And it ruptured into the coal mine and flooded all of the major riverways in Martin County, polluted the water, dumped mercury, heavy metals, all kinds of toxins, and is actually the focus of this week's paper, which is titled "The EPA Actions in Post-Disaster Martin County, Kentucky: An Analysis of Bureaucratic Slippage and Agency Recreancy." And what it does is lay out kind of the timeline of events and the story of how the people of Martin County were so severely marginalized in the cleanup efforts and honestly denied information about what had happened to their town and what had happened to their watershed. Just like highlights of the paper, the EPA sets up this unified command structure to try and coordinate the entire government response to the disaster, but they end up housing it on the property of the coal manufacturer that was responsible for the accident in the first place. So you're sending the wrong message.
Yeah,
right
it's
off the bat.
unbelievable.
Yeah. But then they ended up, after allowing the coal company to edit press releases for multiple government officials and allowing them to be present in every citizen town hall to address the citizens, they end up pursuing charges under the Clean Water Act rather than the Comprehensive Environmental Response Liability and Compensation Act, or CERCLA. But the difference being the liability that the coal company would be under CERCLA is substantially greater than under the Clean Water Act. Mm-hmm. But the people of Martin County, at least in their retelling, feel that the EPA chose, in consultation with the coal company, to pursue the lesser charge and kind of leave them hanging, Yeah. And I feel like that matters in a broader sense because, and the reason this paper was important, because the people of that part of Kentucky have for so long been marginalized. It's the birthplace of the company store. The coal industry has mistreated that region for years and years. And to see Adam taking, I think he said almost $250 million and putting it into that region, that is the type of leadership from the private sector that I'd like to couple with action from the government to try and drive innovation and growth in that part of the state.
Well, I think what's important about this paper is that it provides a lot of context for what Adam is doing, and that no matter what incident it is, whether it's in Martin County or whether it's the BP oil spill, these incidents happen, and the federal government typically steps in and typically takes some of the burden off of these companies that are doing it. I mean, the same thing would happen if there's a nuclear power plant that has some sort of leakage, right? And I think that's kind of the argument constantly against nuclear, right, is the storage of the radioactive material. But if you're having, slurry that needs to be stored as well, that also poses an issue, maybe not as big of an issue, but still a big one. I mean, Martin County is still struggling with water, with getting clean water to this day.
Oh yeah, no. And cancer rates are greatly increased in the area, all kinds of bad reactions.
So, but I think that, again, the reason this is important is because we have to recognize that just because people outside of Appalachia may not necessarily feel the burden or the impact of these happenings, that it's still important.
Yeah.
And so we have to continue to look for policies that, one, people that live in a bigger city that, again, this doesn't impact their daily life, they still need to get closer to a renewable plan. But we also can't forget about what's happening in Appalachia at the same time. And so what Adam is doing is a great step. I want to see what policies we can do to kind of further that. So one thing that has kind of come up recently and that Adam mentioned is the fact that a lot more people are going to be moving to EVs, electric vehicles. And that's in part because like Tesla is produced them. So now you're seeing traditional plants, such as like Ford and GE are all starting to look towards making more electric vehicles. Well, now the state of Kentucky is looking at a new gas tax which is what pays for our roads, right? So every city gets a certain percentage of the tax from, at the gas pump. And they're looking at increasing that and then also adding a tax to electric vehicles because they're obviously not paying gas tax.
So disincentivizing electric vehicle ownership throughout the state.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this because I think it's fair because they aren't paying any type of tax and they're using the roads, and there's a specific tax that pays for the roads.
I can understand the logic, but it would still have that practical effect of making it more costly.
Right. But the tax is also going to raise gas prices and all throughout the state of Kentucky at the same time. Yeah. So it's going to do both. Now, with that said, so I go back and forth, and a lot of cities can't afford to pave their roads currently or maintain them currently without at least doing a substantial supplement from their general fund, which puts other economic strains on the cities. But that just goes back to, how do we want to model our cities? Is there enough emphasis on creating new modes of transportation, or are we just going to continue to push towards sprawl? And the state of Kentucky has continued to push towards sprawl. And that I guess my whole point with this is that this is just every little facet of talking about the renewable energy game. You have to encompass every single other potential side effect. And so every time we put a policy that just talks about like paying for our roads, I mean, that seems like an important infrastructural discussion, but there's an impact on the renewable energy and our environment. So I think that's an interesting kind of caveat. The other thing that he mentioned is the local option sales tax is one thing he would like to do.
Yeah, I think we briefly mentioned that in the podcast in the past. But yeah, can you explain it again?
Yeah, so again, that's just the idea. And it's interesting, too, because a lot of progressives support the local option sales tax, but it seems to be more of a regressive tax that conservatives that continue to push for a consumption-based tax push for. But with that said, it's essentially a 1% add-on to whatever the local sales tax is. And that then goes directly back to the city. That's been done really well with Oklahoma City and other places, and really helped bolster a lot of mid-sized cities. So I go back and forth on that too, but I think there could be some positives, and something like a place like Martin County could use that to help supplement the growing renewable energy space in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen Adam in the private sector start to make the investments. I think, at least from the point of view of Kentucky, we need the state government to step up and start taking those actions too. Because it seems like, Adam talked about bringing together a group of coal executives to kind of lobby the state for increased funding. And I think access to grants and access to the resources the government can provide are going to be essential to the rural parts of Kentucky that have so long depended on the coal industry, which, also brings to mind the coal to solar programs that he was talking about, converting mining operations or former mining operations into coal powered utility scale operations. Solar powered utility scale operations is kind of a no-brainer. I think it's a forward-thinking direction for our state to be headed in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that we try to pin him down on, and I love Adam, but I don't think that he actually gave an answer on it, was like, where should the policy focus be? And I think he probably didn't give an answer because it probably needs to be at the federal, state, and local level.
Yeah.
One idea that I've kind of pushed around is, why are local cities not holding public utilities accountable? So right now, he was mentioning how, at least in the eastern zone of the electric grid, he can sell Appalachia's renewables to Fortune 500 companies that are trying to go all green.
Yeah, how the state is on two separate, or connected to two separate power grids, and the cost is different between them.
Right. And so he's able to sell to Fortune 500 companies. So there's a market there, because bigger companies that you may, like, again, Ford, GE, are trying to go more green that maybe you wouldn't have thought were going to try and go green 20 years ago. Now, with that said, so there's a market there. But the other aspect is, the largest market still seems to be the residential and the consumers, right? So we don't have enough solar, every home doesn't have solar, but public utilities are the ones that provide it. If cities are going to keep accepting rate increases from utility companies, the cities are going to have to start requiring a certain percentage of renewables to be funding the electric grid to the public utility. So I think the issue is, we're not seeing the commitment from public utilities to renewable energies, and the cities have to hold them accountable.
Yeah. And I mean, that plays back into that, like requiring action on the state, local, and federal level.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to need to galvanize the public to try and motivate them to demand these kind of actions from their government, And I mean, this is a policy podcast. Like these are the kinds of things that like we would like to educate people about so that they can go out and maybe try and affect that change in their communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that to be said, there's a lot of policies that can be going forward. Obviously, people have pushed around, a carbon tax and everything from the federal level, but I think it's important to start looking at this from the federal, state, and local levels. The last thing I just wanted to add was I thought it was interesting that Adam didn't specifically bring up hydroelectric. I know we talked a little bit about the pump storage hydroelectric, where they pump the water up to the mountain and then whenever from solar energy, and then whenever needed, it gets trickled back down and through a turbine so that it can create energy instead of using a battery. But Kentucky has the second most navigable waterways behind Alaska. Like, it's surprising to me that we don't have a greater emphasis on hydroelectric power. Now, maybe that's just, it's not efficient enough. I don't know. But it's not like we're sitting here with just tons of lakes. We're sitting here with navigable waterways, like rivers, that could be used.
Yeah, my assumption is like it would probably be best to incorporate as many different avenues for like renewable energy production as possible. And, maybe there's somebody out there that does have that kind of investment in their portfolio. Like maybe it's just not Adam.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to hope that there is somebody, that's making those kinds of investments. I assume we have more than enough resources given the navigable waterways, as you just mentioned. But I don't know, man. I think you just have to hope that those investments are being made and try and do what you can to lobby the government to, invoke some action on their own. Yeah,
absolutely. But again, I think this just goes back to we have to have a commitment from both the public and private sector. And as of right now, I think the entire developed world is struggling with getting to that next stage or getting to the fully renewable stage, because you could see a world where every single home has a solar panel on it, right? And where everybody's driving electric cars, and then every grid is powered by renewables. But it's just difficult to get there from where we currently are, and trying to transition away from fossil fuels is the difficult aspect until the infrastructure is built. So, but I think that's just going to have to be a coordinated effort between both the private and public sector. And it's going to have buy-in from the general public and the general consumers.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
But, well, anything else to add, Luke?
No, I think that's it for me.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot. As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us on Building This Community. If you'd like any more information, you can follow us on Twitter at BuildingThisCom, COM, or you can follow Andrew
at Andrew J. Klump. And you can also follow Luke
at LMP43. Definitely subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you guys next week.